Let's talk about the activity lifecycle with Android. Every single callback method that you'll see here, we even start out with onCreate. It's overridden, which means that if we don't even actually need this method in here, it just wouldn't necessarily load something that we absolutely need in here, which is obviously the layout. So that's the only reason why this comes standard inside your activity. Now there are several other options available. We have all these different callbacks, and all of these different callbacks are instances within the life cycle of an activity that Android provides an opportunity for you, the developer, to do something. And obviously in some instances it would make more sense to do things than in others. It would not make sense to try to register a button on Click Listener in the onStop. Obviously, you'd want to do something like that when at the beginning of the scene, right? So in onCreate. You could do it in other locations as well, as such as on Resume. However, you would be, in essence, doing this every single time that the screen begins to accept user input. And so if you were to put an onClick listener inside onResume, you're just eating up system resources. So let's kind of take a look at this. We have onCreate. Let's do onStart, onResume, onPause, and onStop. And there are a couple of others. We have onDestroy and onRestart. All right, and at this moment in time, if we ran this application, nothing would show. We actually want to log out some information to the console so that we can see when these things happen. Now we can do a tag like this, or we can do a tag like now what this allows you to do is to essentially be able to copy this entire statement and put it into another location, another file, another activity, or a fragment. And then all you'd have to do is copy this and then paste it straight in here. And then the dot tag, none of this is required. You can make this random numbers and letters and not even have an append, but I just like to have this so that then if I want to filter out my logcat to where I get all of the tags, no matter what screen I'm in, I can just type in tag and I can get all of that. All right, so as you see here, all of these methods, override methods, are calling super. And that's just so that the life cycle for the operating system and the activity doesn't get messed up. And so, in fact, if you try to take any of these out, it's going to complain for that very reason. Now, when you tie into some other different callback methods that are maybe not as important as these lifecycle methods, then you may have the option of taking the super out. And it's important to do that once in a while just to see what happens. Sometimes you'll have an instance where you have to do things before super is called rather than after. And then that affects the behavior of your application, either the way that you actually want it to occur or adversely. So it's important to mess around with this tool as much as possible and develop an intuition. So now let's run this application. All right, so now we can target our main activity. And the other thing that we can do is .tag and get just the tag statements. And so as we see here, onCreate was fired, onStart, and then onResume. Now the important ones here, onCreate, this is where you set up your view and initialize any of your UI elements. You're basically setting up your stage with the curtains drawn. Nothing is drawn to the screen at this point. On start, things are drawn to the screen. On resume is when the window or the operating system is now ready to respond to user input taps on your activity and then send that information to your activity. So say, for instance, if you had a button and you were tapping on it, it wouldn't register here. It would start to register that button presses were occurring and on resume. Incidentally, on resume fires every single time that the screen comes back into view. So if you leave your application, so let's do that. So we're going to leave the application, and now we see on pause and on stop. So on pause, hey, the screen is starting to go away. We don't need to register any further taps on the screen. On stop, all the processes for the application with regard to the UI has stopped at that point. And the instance has been saved at this point so that however the application was at that point, it's kind of like a snapshot. And so it's just sitting here. And you tap on this, and then it's going to restart your application, and then it's going to call start again. So just like start and on-start, or on-start and on-start, just like the first time, and then resume. So the difference here is onCreate was not called. So it's important to understand that. If you have code that needs to happen, like refreshing the screen, you don't want to have that code inside onCreate because it's not going to be called every single time. Same thing with rotations. So if we see this, we were at on resume, and then we went to on pause, on stop. onCreate was then called, and then on resume, and that's because the activity was destroyed. And now when we rotate back, on pause, on stop, on destroy was fired, and then on create is fired again, on start, on resume. So it's just like you closed down your application and then started it up again for the first time. That's kind of what's happening every single time you rotate. Now it doesn't go all the way that way because as you'll see, when you handle device orientation changes or configuration changes, as it's called, you'll have something called the saved instance state, and this is a bundle. So you're going to be able to pass important information that you want to keep between rotations. And in fact, we can take a look at that right now. So if we say save instance state, we can see that there are two methods here. And go with this one. There's another one, so why don't we just get that one too, just so you can see the differences. And then on restore instance state, and there are two of them as well. Let's just reorder these a little bit. Let's rerun the application. All right, so we have on create, on start, on resume. Let's rotate. So we were at on resume, and then on pause fired, then on saved instance state fired, and then on stop fired, on destroy, on create again, on start, then on restore instance state was fired, and then on resume. So this is important to understand that when you pass in data between instance states or configuration changes, this is the location where you'll want to grab any of that data that you wanted to pass in to go to the next configuration orientation. And so let's rotate back, and it'll do the same thing. Now we have on restore instance state, and we have on restore instance state. So which one is firing? So let's see, we'll say 2 because it has 2 of these guys in here, and we'll do 1 because there's only 1, and same for this one. So we'll say 2 and we'll say 1. So now let's relaunch this. All right, so let's do the rotation again. So we see here only one fired. We don't have two. And again, only one fired. So that's really important to understand. You don't want this one that has two parameters. Just the ones that have one.